And now, if we could have Tukoroirangi Morgan to speak to us, please. Thank you very much.
If I can just digress just for a moment. This morning was a historic occasion. The dispute, an industrial dispute, one of the longest in our country, has come to an end after 80 days between the Meat Workers Union and the owners. And I just want to acknowledge my colleague here, Mark Solomon, who, along with myself and others, mediated a unique position that the Iwi Leaders Forum has taken in such a important and long-lasting dispute. I'm pleased to say that a few minutes before 6 this morning, the deal was done, and 1,200 people, most of whom were our people, are back to work tomorrow. Kia ora tātou, e ngā rangatira. Tēnā koutou, kei te ariki, se tumu, to the New Zealand delegation, and to my colleague Mark Solomon, the leader of Ngai Tahu, to each and every one of you, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa. Since time immemorial, as youngsters, we were taught that we were inextricably bound with the river. We took our name from the river nourished us, and in times of despair and great need, it provided spiritual sustenance. It was our playground and the primary means to transport our people and goods to settlements within and beyond our tribal region. There was a time at the height of our powers that our tribe were in complete control of their lives, when our economic power was undeniable, that we traded flax and wheat. Thousands of acres of our land was transformed into market gardens, and that enabled us to sell our produce, and we bought our own trading ships that travelled to Australia, to England, and to the Americas. We had our own money, and in the face of growing colonial population throughout New Zealand, a movement to unite our people across the country began. In 1859, the King movement was established with the Waikato Ariki, Paramount Chief Pōtatau Te Wherowhero at its head. It was our way of putting an end to bitter intertribal fighting, to halting the sale of land to a growing number of settlers, and more especially to protect our way of life. And to deal with the current issues of the day, the King had his own newspaper, the printing press, a gift from the Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph. And then in 1859, the Austrian geologist Ferdinand von Hofstetter became the first European to venture up the Waikato River, and this is what he wrote: "The impression made by the sight of this majestic stream is truly grand. It is only with the Danube and the Rhine that I can compare the mighty river which we have just entered. Its waters roll through the most fertile lands and most beautiful fields, populated by numerous and most powerful tribes of the natives, who have taken their name from it, and they look upon the Waikato more than any other river of New Zealand as being exclusively their own." And just 4 years after Hofstetter recorded his observations, the Waikato region was invaded by the colonial troops, and the people of my tribe were murdered and the survivors driven into exile. And as a punishment for not wanting to sell our land and daring to elect a Māori king to represent us, the colonial government then confiscated 1.2 million acres. In what we called Aupatu, we lost our homes, our villages, those most fertile and beautiful fields, grown crops which were sold to the colonial settlements both in New Zealand and beyond, were all taken from us. We were robbed of our economic base. When our lands were confiscated, we were robbed of our future prosperity. But that was not all that the government took from our people. They took the most precious tongue of all, the Waikato River. So the road to redemption and recovery has been a long and arduous one. From visitations to monarchs in England to a legislative seat in the Parliament of New Zealand, the quest to seek compensation for that which we lost proved unsuccessful. And after years of negotiation by our leaders, in 1995, the historic land settlement was formalised by the then Prime Minister of our country, Prime Minister Jim Bolger, and the late Māori Queen, Te Ariki Nui Tukoroirangi Kahu, on the 22nd of May, 1995. And that settlement was viewed by our people as a springboard to move on from a position of grievance to a roadway and a pathway to new opportunities. It was our chance to rebuild our fortunes and to build a highway of opportunity. And in 2008, after 4 years of haranguing the government, both Lady Raiha and I, on behalf of our people, signed a deal with the Deputy Prime Minister Michael Cullen in August that year, recognising the special relationship between the tribe and the river. For our tribe, it was never about getting a title or who owned the river. We didn't need a piece of paper to tell us that the river belonged to us, because we are the only tribe that took its name from the river. The lower part of this river is classified currently as a degraded body of water, which means you can't swim or take food from it. So this has been the source of much anguish for our people, and is the reason why that one of the primary objectives of the settlement was about the river itself. Simply put, this river is a living ancestor, and the concept of an ancestor river is central to our identity as a people. The river is a representation of the tribe's spiritual authority and power, and it harbours the life force of its people. So, this extraordinary settlement was in two parts. First of all, a recognition of our cultural values, that the river is an ancestor, and the protection of its life force was hugely important. And then there was the issue of co-management and co-governance. So all the way up until our lands were taken, and after the conquest and the confiscation of our territories, we were mere bystanders to what happened to our ancestral river. So first and foremost, it was always about cleaning the river up. The driving motivation for Lady Raiha and I was to restore the health and well-being of the river for future generations. And in order to do that we had to have real legislative power to make the decisions. We weren't interested in any tokenistic relationship, that we were going to be a quasi-committee of the Crown or a council. We were interested in real decision-making power. And so this agreement, this settlement with the Crown, is the only agreement that you'll find in our country that goes to the heart of what we mean co-governance. The Waikato River is 425 kilometres long and supplies more than 25% of New Zealand's electricity generation, a fifth of New Zealand's exports, and more than 20% of New Zealand's GDP is derived from within this catchment. It flows through some of the most intensively used and modified rural lands in New Zealand. There are more than 470 current resource consents, which combine allow for the siphoning of nearly 250.6 million cubic metres of surface water per day. And that's enough to fill 100,000 Olympic swimming pools. That's what's extracted from our river. There are 80 point-sourced discharges that go into the main stem of the river, and to the catchment area, about 1,600 discharges. And with economic gain, there's often, unfortunately, environmental pain. Scientists estimate that the waste generated by 3,000 dairy herds in the Waikato River catchment is equal to the waste from about 5 million people. So make no mistake, my ancestral river and the river that catches the southern part of Satumu Te Heoheo's tribe is very, very sick. And approximately 90% of its wetlands is gone. Bacteria levels downstream from Hamilton, the largest city in my region, often make it unsafe for swimming and taking food from. So, over time, as a result of human activity, the degradation of the river is obvious. And what is clear here is that our settlement goes to one singular purpose, that is to find innovative ways to restore the health and well-being of the Waikato River. And key to that is the Ture Whaimana, a new law. This settlement legislation gives statutory recognition and sets out how to promote an integrated, holistic and coordinated approach for the management of the river. The Ture Whaimana, the policy-setting document, is there and entrenched forever. The new law has the ability to trump national policy water standards, all the way down to water quality and water standards, and it covers 22 pieces of legislation and 8 government ministries. Those powers are embedded in the newly established co-governance entity over the river, the Waikato River Authority. So in the new era of co-governance, we have 10 members, 5 people from the tribes, 1 person from the 5 river tribes, and 5 members representing the Crown, some of whom are members of the Council. 2 co-chairs, myself and a former Minister of the Crown, the Honourable John Luxton, completely and totally funded by the Crown. Half of all the resource consent hearings will be manned by our people, and we have the ability to request call-ins, for example, the building of new power stations, any major developments on the river, along the river, on top of the river, are all subject to the call-in powers. This is an extraordinary leap forward as we've tried to wrestle with a position where iwi tribes entrench themselves in decision-making roles. So, through its functions, the authority will promote an integrated, holistic and coordinated approach to the implementation of the vision and strategy. And as I've said before, our spectator role is over. It is unacceptable to us that things that we did as children is not able to be enjoyed by my grandchildren today it is completely unacceptable to us that the river has been allowed to degenerate to the point where it's now not even safe to take food from it. The settlement also establishes a new clean-up trust, and the Crown have kindly donated initially an initial payment of $210 million. And just last month, we distributed the first run of grants totaling $7 million to creative projects ranging from restoration of fishery habitat of whitebait and long fin eels to educational programs for young school children. The grants are a springboard to growing widespread community support to protect and restore our river. We're excited by the future because for the first time we are working together, collectivising our expertise, our passion and our commitment to restore the health of the Waikato. So we envisage that these creative ideas will be important to enabling our own tribal members and every other New Zealander, concerned New Zealander, to come to a better place of understanding so that we might entrench and work together as one cohesive unit. And at a tribal level, for our own tribe, in our own area, co-governance and co-management also means that we now have formalised agreements with the councils in our region, that there is a provision for customary activities, that we share responsibility of every facet of the management of the river at every level, that we co-manage the lands and sites of significance, and that we have a direct input into the decision-making policies and plans. And clearly what this demonstrates is that from the top all the way through its levels, our people are completely and totally involved. We are confident that arising out of this settlement will be new relationships that lead to greater understanding and learning between our two cultures. And sure, we understand that there will be challenges along the way, and the government has committed significant funding to implement the various creative ideas that we work on. What is important here is that this river settlement has also created huge opportunities for the 4 other river iwi, one of which is the Tumus, Tuwharetoa, Ngāti Raukawa, Ngāti Maniapoto, Te Arawa. And we are all, as river people, committed to an intergenerational approach to caring for our river. And for those 5 river tribes, cleaning up the river in real and significant partnership with the Crown, with councils, with corporates, and our communities, essential to the most comprehensive environmental restoration program in New Zealand history. So this is where the story and the history starts to get more exciting, because it's only by working together. And I began this presentation by giving you a sense of the history of Waikato Tainui, from the time of the golden years of our people, and then the road to recovery and redemption, and to 2012 and to today, that we are optimistic about this partnership to drive one principal goal, and that is to restore the health and well-being of our people. The second Māori king who led our people into exile after the land wars summed up the river in this way: Tōku awa koiora me ona pikonga he kuratangi hia o te mātāmuri, the river of life, each curve more beautiful than the last. I conclude my presentation with something that one of our great chiefs said and reminded us as young people, that the river belongs to us, just as we belong to the river. The Waikato tribe and the river are inseparable and are inextricably bound. It is a gift by our ancestors, and we have a duty to protect the gift for future generations. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Ka huri, kia ora.
Waikato te wakatohia, katohia he waimau, katohia he waimau, ka eke ki te puaha, Waikato te awa, piko he taniwha he, piko he taniwha, te patara kai tahuri weri, nā au ka haha Waikato, ka mauta titira ki tahurira ko, kau piri te mauna pota tau te kanata. Ria te hai ka waka ki mera wahia tura na waiwai, mā te o katoa, ni whakamutu na hawa tu taira, au e hoki au e Tina! Tai ki e!
Thank you for that very generous presentation and such an optimistic note on which to finish. This is a problem that's not unfamiliar in Australia, and one where I'm sure we can learn from you.